Want to draw an eye? Come on. Let's get a fresh sheet of paper. Make sure it stays steady. I like to put a straight line across the paper so I can compare my angles to it. I'm putting the angle of the brow there. I then mock in the shape of the eye socket. I'll go into Photoshop and show you a bit more clearly what that is. Here is the angles of the eye socket. This is the shape I like to start with. It's a great base to put all of the further parts that we're going to put on top of. Now that we've got that sorted, I'm just blocking in the shape of the eye socket, going down, back up, and rejoining to make a full shape. After this, I like to put in the line that the eye will sit on and mark out where the tear duct and the outside of the eye are going to be. The eye itself is made up of sets of planes. I'll show here. The top part of the eye is made up of 3 planes, 1, 2, and 3 there. There is a little separation there. This then joins on to the 2 planes which I'm indicating on the bottom. We'll go back to our paper and put that in now. The first of the 3 planes, the second, and then the third dropping back down. Then there's that little separation that comes back in. And then going back down for the 2 planes that make up the lower part of the eye. Now that we've got that sorted out, I'll go back into Photoshop. The planes themselves have a thickness to them. That's what makes them 3D. I'll start with the top lid, showing here that there is a thickness in there. This almost mimics the 3 planes that we talked about before. We'll then do the lower lid. There's then a thickness inside there, again almost mimicking the 2 planes that we illustrated earlier. There is then a thickness in the bottom lid, which I'm illustrating here. There is then a further thickness in the top lid, which is a little crease where the eyeball goes under the brow ridge. We'll then go back to our piece of paper now, and we'll put all of this in. Starting with the top lid, almost mimicking the 3 planes that we put in already. Just evening up the tear duct there. Just fill this in a little bit and even it out. We'll then go to the lower lid, trying to illustrate the thickness of the lid, and then we'll do the lower part of the lower lid. And it's starting to look more 3D. Just evening these up a little bit, making them a bit more rounded. I'll then go back into Photoshop. When putting in the iris, I don't focus on the actual shape of it itself, I focus on the shapes that surround it. This makes it a lot easier trying to get the shape of the iris in the eyeball itself. Just illustrating it there. Go back to our piece of paper and we'll put this in, focusing on the shapes that surround it rather than trying to get a real circular shape for the iris. This also really helps when you're trying to place the iris on the eyeball itself. I'll then put in the top crease there that we talked about earlier. Going over the top and then back down, and it flares out just a little bit there. I'll go back into Photoshop now and show you the next part. Typically, the top lid of the eye we put in earlier is where the shadow usually is, and the lower part of the lower lid is also typically where the shadow is. I'll now go over where the shadow is in this example, trying to focus on making the shadows into a collective shape rather than just filling in value randomly. We'll go back to our paper now and fill all of that in and try to map out where the shadow falls on this example. Trying to make a discernible shape rather than just filling in value randomly. Now I'm just putting in where the lower part of the eyebrow would be. We'll just map it on the lower part of the lower lid as well, focusing on the shape of the shadow rather than putting in any value at this point. Now that we've got that all mapped in, we can go and put a base value into all the shapes that we've outlined. Try not to go too dark, as it will be quite difficult to then take an eraser, like there, and lighten any of the parts we filled with value. Just finishing off now. Again, if there are any parts that you've gone over, just go through with an eraser and lift those parts out again, like the lower lid there, which is usually in the light. There's a little part of the thickness I didn't indicate, which I'm going to put in now. It does go a little bit further down towards the tear duct at the bottom there. Go back into Photoshop now. When trying to put value on the eyeball, this is how I like to visualize it. I like to visualize a band going across it, as there will be a shadow cast by the top of the eyelid. I then like to outline any highlights that there are on the eyeball. In this example, the shadow falls in here and then also out to the right here, and a little bit on the lower part of the eyeball as well. We'll go back to our piece of paper now and fill this in. Putting that band across, this will also help when we go to place the pupil. Now I'm going to mark in the shape of the highlight that's on the top of the iris, and then putting in the pupil, and then filling this in, putting the pupil the darkest. It's already starting to look like an eye. Remember to be as light as you can, as it helps when trying to lift the value out of the highlight. When shading the eyeball itself, I like to put a light value over the top of the eyeball, and then after that I like to come in with an eraser and carve it out. Just evening it up there, just trying to communicate the transition from light to shadow, but still keeping it rather light as it is an eyeball. Now that we've got a lot of the shading done, I'm going to go and firm up the bottom edges of the shadows. The bottom edges of shadows or of form shadows are hard edges, and the top edges of form shadows are rather soft. You can see me just feathering it out there, and this starts to make it look more like an eye. Just adding a little bit of value to the bottom of the iris and shoring up the lower lid there. You can use your finger for this part, but I like to use a paper stub. You can get one of these from an art shop, they're quite cheap. You just use these to blend parts and make transitions between shadow and light. I'm trying to go over all rounded and soft forms here, feathering the transition between light and shadow. Again, just firming up some edges to make them a little firmer, and feathering out the transition between the top of the iris and the bottom of the iris. With rendering, you can go a little bit overboard sometimes, and it can take quite a little bit of time. But I think at this point, we're done. Yay! We're done! We drew an eye! Thank you very much. Remember to like and subscribe and ring the bell. Leave a comment if there is any tutorials you want me to go over, any part of the facial anatomy that you would like me to go more in depth with. I would be happy to do so. Look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day creating.